Hello, PBNSG. Let's hear it for Paul. Put your hands together. And how about all these hardworking volunteers, like he said, especially Jeremy, Stephanie, and everybody else, everyone that volunteers, thank you. I'm proud to be a volunteer. I'm happy with what they brought into my life in the past year and a half. Like Paul said, my name is Jim Balla, and I'm only half the man that I used to be. Today, I'd like to tell you a story of how I lost 164 pounds in 13 months. I started off, I remember my earliest days with food is my mom and dad, they really didn't have any processed food in the house. It was always dairy, 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 milk, milk, milk. Don't drink anything. There was nothing, no pop in the house, nothing like that, no iced tea. It was always just milk. I remember my sandwiches going to high school and junior high school, being that big Dagwood sandwich with an inch of meat on it and a bunch of cheese and mayonnaise, and all the other kids were jealous. They had one slice of bologna. I wish I was eating their sandwich now. But like I said, I've been overweight my whole life. And about 30 years old, I started having some problems, and high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and now I'm starting to lose my weight. It's my first time speaking to a crowd. So now what was I going to say, right? This is my story and it's easy to tell. So I've been on every diet that there is out there, always trying to lose weight, and then I'd always gain it back. And getting sicker and sicker after 30, taking all kind of medications. And I guess the problems all really hit their head in 2009. I'm a painting contractor, and we were on the job, and I was having a hard time climbing a ladder because I was so overweight, and I was having to hire people to help me because I couldn't do my job the way I did it before. So I had to hire 2 or 3 guys, and I remember I was so tired after 4 and 5 hours of work, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was starting to get scared and nervous. And then, I fell down on the job. I was coming down the steps, and I tripped on the steps, and I kind of sat backwards on a wire brush. Didn't really think anything of it. The wire brush poked me a little bit on my butt cheek, and that was it. We went on for the rest of the day, and I never thought about it. That night when we got home, I got a call from the hospital, and my dear cousin was in the hospital. He was 50-some years old, and he was passing away, unfortunately, from alcoholism. And so we ran to the hospital to see him. They didn't think he was going to make it through the night. And Beaumont Hospital had a lot of infections going on. They had staph infection, they had MRSA, and everything else, and they warned us about it. And they asked us, hey, if you have a wound or anything like that, let us know. I didn't even think about me poking myself in my rear. I mean, it didn't even bleed. I had one little dot of blood when I got home. That's all I noticed. So they dressed us up in our gowns. We said our last prayers and wishes to my cousin, and came home. The next day, I got up, got in the bathroom, and I felt something sore on my behind. I didn't even think about that's where, I got injured yesterday. And it felt like a pimple was growing there. I'm like, wow, that's a weird place for a pimple. I didn't think anything of it. And the next day, I come home, didn't bother me for the rest of the day. Next day I get up. Now the thing is sore. And it's about half the size of a golf ball. And it was kind of bothering me. And I'm like, wow, this is getting worse. I wonder what the heck's going on. And it was on a Saturday, and I was going to go to the emergency room. My doctor was closed, but I had a $10,000 deductible to get into the hospital. And I said, you know what? I'll wait until Monday, and I'll go see my doctor first. So Sunday I woke up. Now this thing is as big as a tennis ball on the back there. It's really sore. What do? Wait another day until Monday. Now I wake up and it's the size of a softball. So I get in the morning, had a neighbor drive me to the doctor, and the doctor's like, get to the hospital right now. You have a huge abscess. Why did you wait so long? And told me to go directly to the hospital. So I went directly to the hospital. They didn't even go put me through triage. They just ran me right into the back, stuck me in an operating room, and I'm sorry, the story's a little hard to tell. And they warned me and they said that we might have to amputate your leg. And I don't really remember too much after that. They took me into surgery. They did a surgery. And I remember about 23 days later, I had 23 operations. That abscess had worked its way down, and the infection that I caught in the hospital, I guess, got all the way down into my leg and up into my intestines. So after 23, every day they would go in and they would debrief and they cut the leg open and see if I had any more infection going on. Then the next day I would come in and they would see that the infection was still growing. They take a little more. And then the third day they take a little more. So I went through 23 of these operations. By the time they were done, the skin from my leg from the front all the way to the back was all the way down to the bone. Half my butt cheek was gone in the back, and it had started coming up into the stomach. And the 23rd day, when I got out the operating room in the morning, they noticed I kept bleeding, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. And they couldn't stop it. So they took me back in the operating room. They looked around. They couldn't tell where the bleeding was coming from. What they had done on the 23rd day is they actually cut near my rectum and they nicked a hole right about an inch inside of my rectum. After they got through operating on that 23rd day, they had put some gauze up there so no blood or anything would get inside me while the gauze was hiding where I was bleeding from. So they kept giving me blood, and the blood was going into my stomach. And I'm puffing up on my stomach, and I'm telling them, oh my God, it's hurt so bad, I don't know what to do. And if anybody knows, when you have stomach problems, they don't want to give you any painkillers. So they took me off my painkillers. I can't tell you how bad the pain was. So I went in for the 25th operation. They're trying to find out where the blood is, and this is again on the 23rd day. They couldn't figure out where the bleeding was coming from. I passed away on the operating table that day. They brought me back, and they still couldn't find the bleeding. Now a new doctor came in because it was 12 or 13 hours since they seen it, and a new doctor took me in the operating room for the 26th time. He found where the bleeding was, but not before they opened up my intestines up here on top. And they took 6-7 feet of my intestines out up here. They didn't need to, but everything was just so filled with blood, they didn't know where the bleeding was coming from, and they were trying to do whatever they could to save my life. So after they cut that out, I'm still bleeding, and I guess the new doctor finally seen where the bleeding was. They ended up patching me up. I passed away 3 times on that operating table. I'm grateful that I still have my leg. I'm grateful that everything they did, even though it was a mistake on going on, but they were desperate. They had to save my life. Not mad at anybody. It happened. I'm happy to be here. I always kept upbeat. I got out of the hospital probably 6 months later, and then I went through 4 months of rehab trying to learn how to walk again because I hadn't moved at all when I went into the hospital. I finally got home 10 or 11 months later, and by this time I had a colostomy bag because of all the work they did on my intestines. I still went to work. I don't wish that on my worst enemy, but they were able to reverse the colostomy bag after 4 or 5 months. I'm happy about that. So now everything is good. So I listened to my doctor. I took all the drugs that he wanted me to, and this is 5 years later now, back to 2017. I'm working, like I said, I can't do my job anymore. I'm 328 pounds now. Everything is bad. My leg, since the circulation is bad, was turning black and blue on the bottom. I was afraid I was going to lose my leg. Life was bad. I was depressed. I hired a new guy, and he came into work, a thin guy in his 30s. He's like, I got to change my diet. I got to think of a more nutritious thing to eat. And when he said that, a bell rang. I said, I've got some old cassette tapes in my house from Dr. John McDougall. I'll bring them in tomorrow, and we could listen to them. So the next day, that was November the 22nd, 2015, I brought the tapes in. I started playing them, and then it hit me. It dawned on me, Jim, here's your answer, right there, right in front of you. I went out, threw away lunch, went to Kroger's, got me some fruit, and they had fruit, and started 100% that day. Never looked back, haven't cheated once. Haven't cheated once, never wanted to. Thinking of ice cream, meat, after everything that I've learned from great doctors like Dr. Doug Lyle, The Pleasure Trap, all his books, all the free YouTube videos he gives out, and John McDougall, all the other plant-based guys that have been here, I listened every single day after that day. I got more educated on what I was doing to my body. I felt so proud to eat this way. I started to feel good. 3 days after I started the diet, I had diarrhea 8 to 20 times a day for 5 years since I got out of the hospital. I was afraid to move out of the house. I was afraid to go anywhere. It was embarrassing going to work, having to use the bathroom constantly. 3 days after starting a plant-based diet, the diarrhea went away. I've never had it since. This is 2 years later. The fourth day, my leg would swell up every day for 5 years. I was taking water pills. I had to hold it up above my heart with 3 pillows at night when I went to sleep to get the swelling down. The fourth day, the swelling went away. Never again have it ever swelled or bothered me again. So here it is, 3 and 4 days after I start the diet, the 2 things that I suffered from the most are gone. I have a normal life. I continue on. On the 10th day, I'm a diabetic. They found out when I was in the hospital 5 years earlier, and I was taking 130 units of insulin. The 10th day I woke up, I checked my sugar. It's down at about 60. And then I ate breakfast. It went up to 90, and I didn't require any insulin after breakfast. I'm like, wow. So I went off to work, and about an hour later, I took my meter with me, and I checked it. It's down at 85. I'm like, how can this be? So I checked it later on. I had my lunch. When I went to start eating lunch, it was down at around 80. I didn't eat any insulin that day. 10 days later, from 130 units of insulin pumped into my belly to nothing. Unbelievable. Two days later, I wake up. I'm dizzy. I'm tired. I didn't feel right. I checked my sugar. Sugar's perfect. It's like 89. I'm like, I wonder what my blood pressure's doing. So I checked my blood pressure. It was like 80/50 because I was still taking my meds. I'm like, oh my God, is that low? So I stopped taking the meds that day. I didn't consult with my doctor. It wasn't a smart thing to do, but I figured it's that low. I'll see what it goes to the next day, and I checked it. My blood pressure today is 112/68, and it was that way after 2 weeks. I was on 8 medications. Medication for my leg. My cholesterol was 360. I took cholesterol medication for 20 years. I went in for my 3-month checkup after I started the diet. The cholesterol was down to 134 without meds. So I'm off all my meds now, off 8 of the 9 meds that I took. I'm still on thyroid medication, but that's been cut in half. So this has been the easiest thing I could have ever done. It saved my life. I feel fantastic. I walk every day because of the energy that I have. I mean, I implore every one of you, if you haven't started before and you're thinking about doing it, do it like I did, go all the way in. You'll see a change in 10 days. After 10 days, if you don't feel any better, if you're not amazed by how great your health feels, then go back to eating the way you've been. I figured, hey, I'm 50 years old. I've been feasting every day, having a birthday party and dessert and cakes and everything. Hey, I could eat potatoes for 2 weeks. All it took me was 3 days for my body to respond. I'm not saying everybody else is going to respond like that, but it was really simple. So that's my story. Thank you for listening. I'm proud to be a member of PBNSG. Thank you.